Welcome to Johnston Seed, Grow With Us. This morning we're going to be talking about we get a lot of questions on anaplasmosis. And as summer progresses in Oklahoma, the occurrence of anaplasmosis in beef cattle herds seem to intensify. Today we have Brayden Hawkins with us, our Sweetlix account manager, discussing some of the questions that come up on anaplasmosis. So welcome, Brayden.
Thanks for having me on, Roger. I'm excited to be here.
We'll get right into it here. And, first and foremost, Brayden, what is anaplasmosis?
So anaplasmosis is an infectious blood-borne disease that's typically caused by the organism Anaplasma marginale. I hope I pronounced that right, but I think that's the scientific name for it. So it's a disease that is transmitted through the blood and it attacks red blood cells. So it goes through and when the body is trying to attack and treat and kill those infected red blood cells, it also harms the good ones that aren't infected. So it really takes a toll on cattle.
Okay, and then another one of the questions, how is it transmitted?
So there's a couple different ways that anaplasmosis is transmitted. The first one being mechanically. So anytime that you're working cattle and you have an infected animal and you're using the same needles or scalpels or dehorning instruments and you're using them on the same animals over and over, it can be transmitted that way. So mechanically, and that also includes biting insects like some sorts of flies. I think the most common way that we associate anaplasmosis transmission, though, is through its biological vector, which are fleas, or excuse me, not fleas, ticks. Ticks are what we hear, especially in parts of Oklahoma that are close to river bottoms, things like that, things along those lines, as the most common way that anaplasmosis is typically transmitted.
Okay, what are some of the clinical symptoms of anaplasmosis, and do all cattle have the same issues?
So a lot of it depends on the age of those cattle, and that's what makes this disease pretty unique. Younger cattle typically don't exhibit any clinical signs if they're infected less than a year old. You start getting to some of those older cattle, though. That's when you see the most severe symptoms, and a lot of those symptoms include depression, decreased feed intake, fever up to almost 107 degrees. You also see some anemia, paleness, and yellow mucous membranes, which is also why this disease is sometimes known as yellow fever. So some of those things that you just see in infected animals are very common symptoms for anaplasmosis as well.
Okay, so there can be carriers of anaplasmosis that do not exhibit the symptoms. How can you know if any or carriers? How can you tell?
So the best way to tell if your cattle are carriers would be actually taking blood work and working with your local veterinarian on some of that stuff. That's really the only way you know. But yes, there can be carriers of this disease that don't exhibit any symptoms. So any of those calves that were infected at a young age and get over the disease, or any animal that gets over the disease for that matter, is a carrier of anaplasmosis for the rest of their lives. So if you're bringing in cattle from outside places, I think it's important to have a good relationship with the person you brought them from or with your veterinarian so you can get blood work on and check those cattle, because once those cattle are in your herd, it increases the likelihood of infection for those uninfected cattle. So carriers are pretty common. And something else I think is important to note is that calves that are born to carrier cows are carriers also. So it's important to know the status of your cow herd, especially if you're in an area where anaplasmosis is a serious issue.
Okay, if the cattle are at risk for anaplasmosis, what are some of the steps the producer can take to reduce the risk or lessen the severity of the symptoms in the infected cattle?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, just having a good working relationship with your veterinarian and having appropriate protocols that are designed for your areas is important. But the most common way to reduce the risk for anaplasmosis is to one, check all the cattle before we bring it in and try to just eliminate the likelihood likelihood or the chance of having that disease in your cow herd, but if you are exposed to it, a lot of people feed or inject some sort of oxytetracycline or chlorotetracycline, which is just a antibiotic, and obviously you have to work with your vet to implement some of those protocols. And if you're doing a feed through, you have to have a VFD script. So those are all things to keep in mind, but really just having a sound management practice and knowing the status of your cattle is really important in helping prevent this particular disease. I think it's important to note that the earlier you can catch it and the earlier you can start treating those infected animals, the less severe those symptoms will be. So the earlier you can get some of those antibiotics or things along those lines, if they are infected into their system, the better off you'll be. Because, if you've got cows that are over 2-3 years old and they're infected and you're not doing anything about it, I mean, you can see up to 60% death loss. So it's a very significant disease that can really impact your bottom line and your livelihood as a cattle producer.
Okay, what products are available through Sweetlix that cattle producers can work with to manage with some of these issues with anaplasmosis?
Sure. So I think our most notable one is our REO Anaplas block. It's a 33-pound press block that is 14% protein and has the active ingredient chlorotetracycline in it, which is an antibiotic. Again, you have to have a vet script, but it's a very convenient way to self-feed cattle that are on pasture. A good dosage of that chlorotetracycline to help prevent or reduce, not prevent, but reduce the severity of the disease itself. We also have a few loose minerals like our REO FC, which stands for Free Choice C6000 mineral. It's a 1-to-1 cal-phos ratio mineral with a solid trace mineral and vitamin package in it, and it's really got that high level of chlorotetracycline in it at the 6,000 gram per ton rate. So those are two of our really popular ones, and they're staples when it comes to helping reduce the impact of anaplasmosis for cattle producers all over the country. So.
And that's one of the things too, that both of these products require a VFD from a veterinarian, so that's why it's very important that they work close with their vet to help, so they can help write the VFD and make sure that they're feeding the proper level they need.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, and people want to know find out more about Sweetlix products and anaplasmosis. Where can you direct them?
Sure. So the first place I like to tell people is our website, which is www.sweetlix.com, or you can reach out to your local Sweetlix account manager, and obviously for those of you that are in Johnston Seed's trade area, they can help you out with all of your Sweetlix needs. So reach out to anybody at Johnston Seed, and they'll take good care of you.
Thank you, Brayden, for your time today and your expertise in this area. Thank you again for taking the time out to answer these questions and work with us, and we look forward to working with you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Roger. I really enjoyed it.